going on with y'all? It's your boy NeohXO bringing you the Black Clover chapter 269 review. This was another good chapter by Yuki Tabata. He always comes and amazes us with all of these amazing chapters. I get a lot of comments saying that you guys are really enjoying these chapters too, so we really in for a treat with Black Clover at this time. So if you're into Black Clover, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because we talk about a lot of that here. Liking also helps. But beginning of this chapter, we just see the AMD, aka Liebe, using an overwhelming amount of power, and we see that he's using this power because he doesn't really, basically it's its emotions. All right, so Asta is used to dealing with situations like this. The AMD Liebe is overflowing with emotions, and that's coming out in the form of power. Now we know in this series, when people get emotional, their power tends to leak out a bit more and they kind of go uncontrollable. We've seen Asta even go berserk himself, and this makes sense because now it's kind of like Liebe's going berserk. Now basically Liebe has an enormous amount of rage and hatred and all of this stuff towards the devils, and I totally understand that. I totally understand why he has all this hate towards the devils. As we seen in chapter 268, the AMD had a hard backstory. Like, it was very sad, you know, and basically Asta's basically going to beat that out of him because he needs to chill, because at the end of the day he needs to move forward. He's kind of stuck in the past a little bit, and Asta's gonna rescue him from himself because he can't be trapped in that sort of headspace for forever. You know, because like Asta said, Asta believes that just because somebody is a devil doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person. So Asta's not just gonna let Liebe go out and kill a random devil that didn't do anything. Like, if you guys gotta think about this, Liebe might want to try to kill Noct because Noct has devils and he wants to kill those devils. You know, Asta can't have that because Noct is one of Asta's companions. So basically Asta says he's gonna fight against the AMD and win. Now a lot of people were actually saying that Asta wasn't going to fight, and instead he was going to choose to just refuse to fight Liebe due to the fact that he doesn't want to fight against someone he cares about. Because we do know Asta cares about Liebe. He even thanked him in the previous chapters, and I think that Asta just trying to help. Now, so the AMD Liebe was pretty much like, cut all that out, I'm not trying to hear that, and he launches the Demon Slayer sword directly at Asta, but Asta sidesteps the Demon Slayer sword and basically hit Liebe in the face with a left hook. He hit him straight in the face with a left hook. This sends Liebe flying, and Asta like pretty much saying like he has this body and he could do something with it. And basically Asta missing his right arm, so it's impressive that he just sidestepped the Demon Slayer sword like that and hit Liebe with a left hook. And this goes way back to whenever Asta was actually fighting with Captain Yami and he hit Vato straight in the face with a punch. And we know that Asta don't need any magic. Like, he really doesn't. Even if he didn't have anti-magic, he would still be strong. Like, he just clean, he got hands. Asta got hands. So basically they're continuing to fight, and we see Noct kind of observing. I'm looking at the facial expressions on Noct's face, and it does not seem like Noct is actually concerned. But now that I'm thinking about it, it never seems like Noct is really concerned. He always has a smile on his face. Even when he's roasting people, Noct has a smile on his face. So I don't know if he just doesn't really care, or the better thing to assume is probably that Noct just knows that Asta is going to succeed, and that's why he's not really being nervous about it. But basically the AMD ends up taking Asta's weapons. He takes the Demon Slayer sword, the Demon Dweller sword, and the Demon Destroyer sword, and he also tries to take Captain Yami's katana. But before the AMD could take Captain Yami's katana, Asta actually grabs it and he basically does not let the AMD use it. So the AMD has 3 swords that he's flying around using anti-magic, kind of like whenever Asta was flying on his sword, and he's flying them around at Asta, but Asta's dodging them for the most part, and he gets hit. He does actually get hit. You got to realize that Asta's not invincible, but the thing about Asta is he can take a hit and get back up. So Asta's moving real swiftly and he's dodging 3 swords. So that's really impressive, but he did get hit a couple times and I don't blame him. You know, he has 3 swords coming at him, so it is what it is. He got hit, but he got back up. That's all that matters. And basically Liebe is saying his physical ability is not enough to defeat him, and that's where he's mistaken, because Asta's physical ability is actually enough to beat Liebe, straight up, and we see that in this chapter. So basically Liebe is downplaying Asta, and he says nothing like that is going to work against higher ranked devils. So he already downplaying Asta, and then Liebe ends up having a flashback to, it seemed like Liebe got PTSD. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, because he always having these traumatic flashbacks. But speaking directly on the flashback, basically Liebe was having thoughts about when he was sealed into the grimoire. Basically it felt like he was floating around in nothing, basically nowhere. He was just floating around, and this does actually make sense, because whenever we have seen him and Asta in the past, it was kind of red and he was just kind of floating as a large figure, a large silhouette. And basically the whole time, or a lot of the time, whenever Liebe was in the grimoire, he was saying to himself how he was not going to forgive the devils and how he was going to kill them and how he hates them. And then basically, since he didn't have magic, eventually anti-magic manifested. So this is actually really cool. I really hope we get more information about this. This does explain it a little bit, but it did not explain it in detail. He manifested this anti-magic while he was in the grimoire, so I think that's pretty interesting, to say the least. We might get more information on it, or we might actually not. It doesn't matter, as long as we at least know where the power came from, you know. So basically they're continuing their fight, and Liebe is basically launching Asta's swords around with his anti-magic. And this is something I want to point out, because this is something we have not seen Asta do. So the fact that Liebe is doing it and Asta uses some of Liebe's power, this should be a move that Asta learns in the future. This will be an amazing move. Now we already know Asta has some far-ranged attacks. We've seen him use some anti-magic slashes before, but this is something different. He's just completely flying the swords around, and he should be able to use this technique, because we did see him controlling anti-magic when he was flying on the sword. So if he can make the sword fly and get on it, he could probably use it in this type of way too, to attack. But that's the first time we've seen that. I really like how Liebe's taking control over them swords and really using them the way he's using them. Asta basically takes a deep breath, and this is for him to concentrate. Now, after he takes this deep breath, he starts using the dancing technique from NeohXO. If you guys remember NeohXO from the Seabed Temple arc, how NeohXO kind of danced around the swords. So Asta's using his previous battle experience to take on Liebe. Now, this is where I think that Liebe and Asta really begin to separate themselves. Liebe was sealed inside of a grimoire for pretty much his entire life. Asta, on the other hand, has been through countless of fights. He's been through training. He has battle experience. He has techniques. He went to the Heart Kingdom. He trained for 6 months. He trained under Kruger. Like, he did all of this stuff. He trained under Yami. We see him master Ki. He has all of these techniques in combat experience, and it doesn't matter how strong Liebe is if he doesn't know how to control his techniques the way that Asta does. And I think it was really cool of Yuki Tabata to actually include silhouettes and kind of throwbacks to NeohXO, Kruger, Mars, all of these people, because I don't really like when characters are forgotten. So even a small callback like this is very interesting to me, because I like all of the characters, even the characters from beginning of Black Clover. So basically Asta is basically overcoming this obstacle placed in front of him, and this obstacle in this case is Liebe. Liebe is in his way because Asta wants to save Captain Yami. Now, Asta has trained so much that there's no way that I see Liebe possibly winning. We even see one of the most hype moments from this chapter is Asta literally uses Captain Yami's technique. That's so cool, man. Like, that's so cool. Asta has come so far, and he's really, really powerful. I don't really even understand the argument anymore that Asta isn't strong, because Asta is one of the strongest Magic Knights. Like, look what he's doing. He overcame, like, okay, at the beginning of the series, he might have not been the strongest, but you guys got to look past the beginning of the series, because this man went through training arcs and just did a bunch of training, and he's been through all of these battles. Also, he's just naturally, Liebe really didn't stand a good chance, because Liebe doesn't have any of this backing him like Asta does. Now, if Liebe had the same amount of training as Asta, it might be a different story, but who even knows if Liebe would be willing to undergo the same kind of training as Asta. Now, I do want to see in the future Asta and Liebe go through some type of training, and they're going to have to come to some agreement. They're going to have to come to some agreement. Asta's actually doing some damage to Liebe in this chapter with no magic at all, no anti-magic, none of that, just his own physical ability, and I think that's very impressive, and I really like this. And he also had one arm. Liebe did not stand a chance, and this isn't even the conclusion of the fight. Next week we're gonna get another chapter, and I think the fight is gonna conclude in that chapter. They could make it to where Liebe just has a hidden power that is enormous that we just don't know about next chapter, but if things are going the way that they're going, Asta is definitely going to win. Very good chapter. My favorite moment from this chapter was Asta using Captain Yami's technique with Captain Yami's katana. My absolute favorite moment from this chapter, and I think I'm gonna leave the video off there. So hopefully you guys enjoy it, and if you did, please leave me a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. As always, it's been your boy NeohXO, and I'm out.